Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Israel became the first country to recognize the nationhood, independent nationhood of the Somaliland Republic. Well, good news for the people, of course, maybe a lot of shock for many, many others, especially the Somalians. Uh, it could have been a surprise, but somehow caught many Africans by surprise, especially the East Africans. And I always wondered what Mr. Isas Afwerki, President Isas Afwerki, thought about it. So far, people are saying that he's been silent about it. Why would that be? I found a very interesting video, and I will spontaneously discuss whatever comes to my mind, ladies and gentlemen. And here it is. And here it is.
In diplomacy, silence can be more telling than words. When Israel recognized Somaliland, the world erupted in condemnation, except Eritrea. For nearly 2 days, Asmara said nothing, a pause that hinted at deep calculation. When Eritrea finally spoke, it issued a cryptic, ambiguous statement. 2 paragraphs, no names, just warnings of a ploy that could spark global crises. The statement didn't mention Somaliland or Israel, instead blaming unnamed forces and calling for UN action. For Eritrea, a nation forged in defiance and self-determination, this was a puzzling shift. Historically, Eritrea has claimed legitimacy comes from its people, not foreign approval. Yet now it seemed rattled, appealing to the very international system it once scorned. The statement's contradictions weren't mistakes. They were the message. Eritrea's response was less about regional stability and more about its own vulnerabilities.
Well, I do believe it has to be like that, like any other country, actually. Eritrea has to worry about its own sovereignty. And then the fact that Eritrea asked the UN to involve in this situation, what is wrong with that? Isn't it a member of the United Nations like any other nation? So what is new in this situation? Eritrea has had a lot of relationships with the UN within its 34 years of independent survival. What is new about this? What is the problem with Eritrea reminding the UN to take care of this business before it gets too late? I think it was normal.
The silence, the omissions, and the sudden appeal to global institutions all pointed to a deeper anxiety. This wasn't just about Somaliland's recognition. It was about Eritrea's fear of a changing order. The statement was a mirror, reflecting Eritrea's own unease. In the Horn of Africa, what's left unsaid can be the loudest warning. Understand the shock Israel's move caused. In December 2025, Israel became the first nation in decades to recognize Somaliland's sovereignty. Somaliland, independent since 1991, had built a stable, democratic state, yet remained unrecognized. Israel's decision shattered a long-standing diplomatic blockade, citing the Abraham Accords as inspiration. The backlash was immediate. Somalia, the African Union, Arab states, Egypt, Turkey, and China all condemned the move. Over 20 countries declared Somaliland's recognition unacceptable. Eritrea's response stood out, not for its support or condemnation, but for its calculated vagueness. It didn't back Somalia's president or join the chorus against Israel. Instead, Eritrea framed the issue as an unnamed ploy, calling for a UN response. This deliberate obscurity was strategic, setting Eritrea apart from the region's unified outrage.
Well, Eritrea doesn't have to react like anybody else. Eritrea acts independent. Well, in this situation, both Somalians are our brothers anyway. I'm giving you my own attitude. Both of them are our brothers. Both of them are our families. I'm talking about in view of the East African countries. Therefore, in this sensitive issue where the Somalians solve the problem themselves, therefore Eritrea cannot just jump into this and get into it. Therefore, I thought it was a good diplomacy to wait and see the war instead of jumping on this issue that is extraordinarily sensitive to the Somalians.
Eritrea positioned itself above the fray, but its silence spoke volumes. In a region of loud voices, Eritrea's ambiguity was its own kind of statement. Eritrea's statement revealed a glaring contradiction, its sudden fixation on international recognition. For decades, Eritrea insisted legitimacy comes from struggle and the will of the people, not foreign approval. Its independence.
Well, but that doesn't mean the United Nations doesn't have to approve nations in this situation. What I'm talking about, Eritrea definitely had to be recognized by the UN. Its flag is already in the UN building in New York City. The UN had to recognize it before it became a country. Therefore, Eritrea obviously depends on the UN for many things. I think this is a little bit exaggerated. Although Eritrea believes on the people as the primary subjects of solving a problem, national problems, it has never denied or rejected the UN as such. It could have had a little bit differences with it for so many years. Of course, unnecessary sanctions and a lot of problems in there. There were contradictions, but the fact that Eritrea abides by the UN, by international order, and then appealing to the UN to come and see this thing, to resolve it in such a way, in a civilized way, before something happens, before war erupts, for unnecessary situations happen in the region, is a very civilized move.
Independence was won on the battlefield, not granted by the UN. Recognition was always secondary to self-determination. Yet now, Eritrea painted Israel's recognition of Somaliland as a world-altering crisis. This is a sharp reversal.
I don't think so. I really don't think so. Eventually, the UN has to get involved anyway, one way or another, as far as the fate of the Somalians is concerned. Whether Somalians will unite and live together, they decide about it so far. One side decides to do that, the other side wants to separate, probably legitimately. This is a very sensitive issue. Eritrea has to be very careful. It has to watch the whole situation very carefully, from strategic point of view, from sovereignty, and then from UN laws of nations. Therefore, it is slow approach in this situation, rather than becoming sensitive, becoming emotional and emotionally charged decisions. I think it's a wise decision for Eritrea to stay neutral for a while.
Eritrea's legitimacy didn't depend on outside validation. Why should Somaliland's?
Well, of course it did. The UN had to recognize Eritrea as a nation. It depended on the UN, it depended on the AU too.
By treating Israel's move as catastrophic, Eritrea admits that recognition matters. Its principles, once absolute, now seem flexible.
No. It could never have been absolute. There is no absolute in politics, no absolute even in mathematics. No. Eritrean position has to fluctuate according to the political tide, geopolitical tide. Okay? There is no stationary political science that serves a nation very well. A nation has to be versatile, of course, flexible, politically speaking. It has to act according to the tide. I don't see any problem with this.
Used when convenient, discarded when not. When it suited Eritrea, self-determination was everything. Now it's a threat.
No, self-determination is still everything. Nations have to depend on their own will to stay united or to separate. I don't think Eritrea has changed any of its principles in this regard.
The real issue isn't abstract rules of statehood, but the precedent Somaliland sets. Eritrea's concern is less about principle, more about protecting its own interests. The statement exposes a deep fear that the rules Eritrea once used could now be used against it.
No. Ain't nothing like that. There is no rule that can be used against Eritrea. It's too late. The Eritrean sovereignty has already been established. The United Nations knows it as an independent nation. Africans, everybody knows it. The region knows it. The only country trying to mess around is Abiy. And then, of course, we will see if he's going to stay in power. The people don't believe it. Therefore, there is no contradiction here. I don't see it as a contradiction. I'm not arguing in favor of Eritrea, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just looking at it neutrally. Eritrea has nothing to fear about its sovereignty that the world recognized already. In fact, we see other nations trying to be sovereign, like Somalia. Okay, a good sign that Eritrea will stay sovereign forever.
In the end, Eritrea's stance is less about Somaliland and more about itself. Is a stunning contradiction. This is a nation that spent decades defying the UN, denouncing it as a tool of Western power. Eritrea has resisted international scrutiny, fiercely guarding its sovereignty. Now it's inviting the very institution it mistrusts to referee a regional dispute.
It always depends whether the UN resolutions should be supported or not. Eritrea supported some resolutions and rejected some of them. But this doesn't make her rejecting the UN altogether. Therefore, I cannot buy this conclusion at all. Eritrea is still abided by the UN, like any other nation. She is a UN member state. I have no idea where this contradiction is coming from.
Eritrea is advocating for a principle it would never accept for itself, letting the UN judge acts of recognition.
I think this is a contradiction. I don't see how he connects. There is no connection to it. I don't understand. I don't understand it. Ladies and gentlemen, do you? Eritrea, as a member state, is abided by the UN. So, has it ever been against the United Nations establishment? Of course, against its policies. It's prejudiced policies in some issues. That's all there is into this. Therefore, I think it is a very shallow analysis, in my understanding.
This sets a dangerous precedent. Could the UN one day question Eritrea's own independence?
No. Impossible. The UN cannot contradict itself. No. In fact, recently the UN has said that Ethiopia and Eritrea have to settle the problem using the Algiers Agreement. The Algiers Agreement cannot change. Eritrea's nationhood cannot change. So this speculation has to be propaganda. It has to be propaganda. Nobody can question Eritrea's independence and sovereignty. No Africans and not even one country in the world except Ethiopia. And for that, we're going to see where it's going to end up. Eritrea has no insecurity in this situation. It's the most stable country in East Africa.
Is less about justice, more about seeking a veto from allies like China and Russia.
On what? Veto on what, sir? There is no issue about its independence, its sovereignty. There is no what to do on this subject matter.
Eritrea isn't appealing to law. It's making a desperate political play.
I disagree.
The irony is clear. Eritrea is using the UN as a tool, just as it once accused others of doing. Eritrea's statement borrows heavily from China's playbook on Taiwan. By warning of threats to regional stability and defending Somalia's territorial integrity, Eritrea echoes the One China principle.
Well,
This is
just saying that it didn't say anything about that. Eritrea couldn't have been the second country to announce the independence of Somalia. For not doing that, it doesn't mean it's supporting United Somalia or whatever it is. Therefore, it's acting like the rest of the countries in the world. It's only one country that actually recognized the country, Somaliland, called Somaliland. Okay? Therefore, Eritrea doesn't have to rush on this one. Eritrea doesn't have to follow Israel. It can wait. It can assess the situation better, so this is totally irrelevant.
reversal for a nation born from self-determination.
There is no reversal here, sir. What stunning reversal are you talking about? Is this Ethiopian propaganda or what? Where is the reversal? Where is the contradiction? It didn't say a word so far. So what is the problem? Aren't so many countries situated in that type of political decision at this point about the country or the nationhood of Somaliland? I call it a country because independently I can recognize it as a country. I think they have a justified cause to be independent. They stayed there since 1999, independent for all these years, running their country democratically. But as for the Eritrea as a nation, it did the right thing. It has to weigh. It has to weigh all the consequences and all the advantages and whatever. It has to act with the world. It shouldn't be expected to act by itself alone. Okay?
Eritrea once fought to break free from Ethiopia, rejecting the sanctity of old borders. Now it champions the very principle it once defied. This ideological shift isn't accidental. It signals Eritrea's alignment with China and Russia.
No, I don't think so. Eritrea is always independent. I don't understand how you connect. I don't see any connection here. How come Eritrea's decision on this matter or not voicing something synchronized with Chinese policy? I cannot understand. I think they're trying to find out something to relate things like the old-fashioned way to hurt Eritrea diplomatically. I don't think it can work like that anymore.
By parroting Beijing's arguments, Eritrea seeks favor with anti-Western powers.
No. In fact, by being neutral like that, Eritrea is carefully watching the West. Is trying to help the situation without aggravating the West in whatever way. Here, I don't see Eritrea's silence can jeopardize its relationship with the West because America is silent too, for that matter. Europeans are silent too.
The statement is less about Somaliland, more about Eritrea's place.
No. I think this is a prejudiced argument. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to bring this to discuss it as an independent analyst. I know the matter, at least I understand it that way. This has to be a propaganda to create problems with the United States of America. It has to be a propaganda of some interest group that fabricates cases like this. Silent Eritrea on this issue has nothing to do with contradiction. With any kind of contradiction, silence cannot be a contradiction. Silence cannot be antagonizing the interest of America in the region. Actually, Eritrea is neutrally watching the whole thing. Therefore, this is just a matter of my opinion, ladies and gentlemen. Whatever you think, you can tell me in your comments. I appreciate your attendance. And if you want, we can bring topics like that if you support the channel. And I appreciate your assistance. The new channel has to develop to deliver a neutral view and then to stop those who contaminate people's sanities with some kind of distortion and unnecessary propaganda. I love you and I'll see you next time.